Okay, there it is.
Okay,
It's
cool.
running.
It's running? All
It's
right.
running. Oh, we also just want to let you know one more last thing. You know, we got Jose Avila, who's also, you should know that he's the director of our education program at the YET, and he's also very integral to this. So I'm really very happy that we have someone from our project, and he's helping with the camera. Thanks, Jose.
Cool. Okay. So, I'm the Counter Nerd Society, and right now I'm going to be speaking from Abel's voice. And it's going to be presenting Mabel Negrete's journey, and practically is how she decided to move to Philadelphia and landed here in a really interesting place. So the piece itself is called Journey to Refuge. And as I talk, you can just grab one of these like flyers. It's like a little zine. So Journey to Refuge is a piece in itself. In some ways, it's how we travel. It's about like how we transform in the process of traveling, what we learn in the process, and also is what we encounter as we are traveling, you know, in space and also through time. Also, this piece, you can look at it as another way. It's the art of claiming one state of being and becoming into many things. So the first part of this talk or presentation is about like how Mabel arrives here, like what are the impetus or what are the ideas or the things that brought her here. Between 2010 2011, she was finishing, or in beginning actually, her thesis. And during that time, she was very worried about how she was going to integrate her personal story with the systemic and larger context about mass. At the time, she was thinking about mass punishment. But later on, she realized that she was looking at mass incarceration and then also like systemic historical trauma. So part of her thesis begins with this statement. When the invisible punishing machine is everywhere, it creeps into my body, life, and spaces like a colossal architecture nightmare. And so what she did is like she went on and traveled and figure out where the invisible punishing machine is. Where is it? So at the very bottom, she started with conversations talking about her stories. And in the process of talking about her stories, she discovered that what she was carrying was her weight. And the weight could be in many ways, means many things. It could be the shame that you carry, could be like the struggles that you carry, could be the questions, it could be many, many things. Then she decided to go into like the Boston City Hall and started to do like this rehearsals. And I don't have a picture right now to show you and there's videos about that online, where she does a solo sit-in. This is like right in March of 2011, and this is right before, several months before the whole Occupy movement begins. Then was to actually do a thesis presentation in addition to a book, and she started to unpack the weight. There she did like a 3 pieces performance presentation, and it encompasses like both like a lecture, and also it talks about like her emotional state, and then it ends with this idea of the rehearsal for future actions. And then finally she moves and travels back to San Francisco, and she does a piece in Alcatraz Island. Alcatraz Island was opened in 1938 as a federal state prison. then one day she decided to just cut the jumpsuit that she was wearing, and transform it into an official weight. This took place in the operation room of the Alcatraz Island. Philadelphia, 2012, 2013. So she arrived to Philadelphia without really knowing much about what was going on in this place. What brought her here is that she was already finishing school. She had the desire to actually figure out what to do next, where to, where would she go and practice what she learned, figure out how to move in space, both as an artist, as a researcher, and many other things. And also a lot of things were changing in her hometown, which is San Francisco. So she moved here in this desire to find a place. And another thing that she was looking for was the beginning of where, the juridical system begins, where the things about incarceration, where the ideas about freedom and penitence. So in that process, of last year, also she was figuring out looking for love, so she signs up with OkCupid. Then she started meeting friends. That's how she met Betsy also, and then many other people on the way. And then she started to scout around in the space to use it for 1 week, and to use the space to imagine what would that refuge look like. It was part of another project that eventually she presented in San Francisco. So she looked around and she realized that something was going on here. A lot of empty houses. And a lot of houses were also being put into auction. And that was going to be happening in November of 2012. As she goes on and figure out, okay, what will this refuge look like? She's looking at, well, what is refuge? An ecology is a place where organisms can escape from predation. So she found a friend through OkCupid. They became very good friends. And they started to look for places, and they decided to move into this place. And one day they went and they sat on the, on the stairs in front of this boarded out house. And they had an amazing conversation. They were making jokes about what's going on, what would happen to us if we go inside and the police shows up. What would we do? We laugh about well, maybe I will be the one talking about it to the police, and Blue will run away. So we went, and so at some point we decided, okay, let's just go. But as we went inside, something horrible has happened, and we were really taken by this experience. It was burned. There was the bones of a dead dog, and a whole bunch of other things, remnants of children's stuff, TVs, all kinds of things ripped apart. And then we found a calendar, and it was dated in 2008. From that experience, we were kind of creeped out, and we decided, okay, let's just not do this. And this is the sort of the end of that journey, at least, of looking for space, physical space, to transform with physical space, at least to live in. And then between 2012, but between September and December, there was a new idea, or she was trying to figure out what would happen, if it wasn't just a house, what will be that place? What will be that refuge? And she started to think about this very seriously and trying to connect what was the Walnut Street jail, what is the significance of this space, with also the things that she was finding in this physical, location where she has relocated. So she started to think about the past and present. The past, where there's these ideas about the construction of the space, at least from the perspective of the juridical system, as this very rigid spaces, the prison cell. And then how that prison cell comes into the notion of incarceration and eventually into solitary confinement, and then the supermax today. And the proliferation of the entire system, of the criminal justice system, and the militarization of the state. As part of that, she realizes that a lot of the things that were happening in the past, there was a lot of ideas about segmenting, organizing things in society in different ways. Stratifying, because it became, as part of the modern idea was to actually create this sort of efficient world, efficient society. And then in the present, Mabel is thinking about, well, I'm already alienated, I'm feeling lonely, alone, I'm connecting, but then things are apart. And it became this idea or desire to actually desegment instead of separating, connecting. To feel a peace at home, to feel care and love, to deal with the colossal, architecture of the invisible punishing machine, to be conscious of the decisions we're making and calling as such home, to practice ways to heal our wounds, because if we think about it, there's many things that are happening here. And to discover finds, is demarcations, where are the limits? But then also how can we join forces? And so I'm going to go back a little bit in time, about the Walnut Street jail, why this notion of being desegmented. Very simply, it's this is where the beginning of this notion about the single prison cell begins, and where for the first time we use this, through the juridical system, we place humans in prolonged isolation. Now, for how long you will be there, how long you will be interacting with the other inmates, it's up to the institution, and also the juridical and the Bureau of Prisons begin to, design those parameters. And to this day, there's an entire infrastructure that deals with how much of human beings should be contained inside of this prison cell, and then interact within the prison walls, and then interact with the world outside. So this goes back to ideas about lineal design, road houses, and I don't know, all these other relationships about how the society has become, it was, and this is right at the beginning of the industrial era too, so that's really interesting. So moving forward now, she started to think about okay, well, I don't think I want to move into a house yet. It's too constricting. It's it's going to put me into this place, and then I'm going to have to spend money. I'm going to have to figure out how to make it work, functional, whatever, Anyway, so she decides to not use that and make the home a place where she's connecting to other people that she's relating with in fundamental levels. So she connected with the Incarcerated PA, with the Human Rights Coalition. As part of that process of becoming desegmented, her journey is to figure out how to connect. And through that, she's been using her bike. So between January and May 2013, now coming back more closer to our time, she's been biking a lot around, tons of it. Her bike is so the sad story of the bike is that just this Friday, was yesterday?
Oh, this is a bad story.
Right.
The front wheel was taken, and then the bike was smashed. So, but she's gonna get another one next week, so she needs it. Anyhow, so as part of this whole connecting and networking, now she's connecting to more people because now she's here in this area in Kensington and North Kensington and Fairhill. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to talk a little bit more into that. I'm going to go into some of the demographics about it. These are the different sort of organizations that she's participating in, but at the same time she's meeting people. And within that she's finding allies to work with, not only on the political end of it, but also how to envision perhaps a different city or perhaps a different neighborhood, perhaps a different street, you know. So here, I'm just going to go into like just the brief information about, this is current information that I was able to gather from a friend who's doing geography. So this is just like the general sort of like area of the minorities, and then the dots signifying this Hispanic population in the area. And these are the 3 area codes that this project is taking place in the 122, 133, and 140. Primarily, Taller is located in 133. Then this is the blue dots represents the Puerto Rican community within this Hispanic community. And then the next one is now all of the statistics come from 2008, so we still have to wait for more updated, information. But this gives us like a rough idea of what's going on. In this area, this is a map that shows like the red area is where the most like highest rate of people who were incarcerated or were admitted into prison. And this is just the adult population. So it's about in the area code of 19133, it's about 18.19 rate, out of 1,000 adults. So as you can start to think about it, or we're thinking about it, is that we are really in the hub or in the most like impacted population by incarceration. And this is just talking about the adult population, but we still have to see how like the youth is impacted, because the state of Pennsylvania is one of the states for incarcerating youth at early age as adults. So she has continued to travel. This is before this all happened with her bike, but she was like traveling around. She's been photographing some areas. This is closer to it's on York and North 5th Street. This is the first like transitional house that she found, and it's called Hogar Fuera de las Rejas. So it's interesting because like it's kind of like a journey, or it's like a home or refuge outside of the prison's cells, but it's actually a home. How is it? Halfway houses. Yeah. They're really interesting because there's a lot of issues right now. There's been statistics about like perhaps they're not really doing or intending to help with the recidivism, but it's also what is also important to consider is like, if you have a population that, and this is, I didn't go into it, but if you have a population that is actually impoverished, about, I don't remember the exact numbers, but about 80% of the population in this area, out of that number, about half of it, or 38%, it only has a high school degree. And then this other percentage is about 7%, which has some kind of professional degree, and then the numbers goes down as you go master's and PhD, so, and then the levels of skills, skilled jobs, high skilled jobs, it's even less, so it's all concentrated in the central city for the most part. The other characteristic is that you see a lot of the criminalization of the population. This is very common. I live also in a Hispanic community or Latino community in San Francisco, so it's like I immediately can see it. You know,
And
some
then
people.
the
The
other
other part of it is like, oh well, things are turning apart. They're deteriorating, but there's all the influences that is for the reason that this is happening. You know, one is development. Another thing is like the scarcity of resources, etc. So there she is, continues to ride her bike, coming back with a whole bunch of like information. So as part of her journey of like figuring out what is going on here, it's also figuring out who is actually doing something about it or is thinking about it, you know, because it's a problem that has like affected the communities, Philadelphia in particular, and it has also divided the community intensely. Underneath all of that is like also classism and racism, you know. So everywhere I go, I see the communities are divided, even though that they interact, but the borders, I'm starting to see the borders, you know, between them. Anyhow, so she's been participating with the Human Rights Coalition, with the Historic Fairhill Burial Grounds, continuing with the Decarcerated, which is a family informally incarcerated people working group, which is really focusing more and more about like figuring out a collective vision of how we can address these issues, you know, that separates, alienates, you know, and destroys our communities. And Taller Puerto Riqueño, which has started as this conversation. So she sees it, and I see it as a window to, you know, to think about the past, but also as a present, you know, that because we're interacting, we're becoming actually, what is it? It's called like intercultural facilitators. So as I'm learning about, I'm engaging with African American, I'm engaging with Latino Puerto Ricans, and I'm engaging with Quakers. I'm starting to see like everybody's thinking about things, same thing, the same problem, but from a different perspective, because some are more affected than others. But they're thinking about the same situation: poverty, crime, mental health issues. You know, all the things that are on the surface and underneath the surface. And this comes from the 70s of a book that Puerto Rico Taller has here. And I read this because the turn of the 70s, like many things start to happen about like how the community was going to be supporting each other. There's a lot of dreams because this is a time where it's like the idea of like change, you know, civil rights movement. And a lot of changes were happening, but also at the very same moment or very same time, 70s, 80s, this is starting is the escalation of the prison boom, you know. Mm-hmm. So there's statistics about like how that happens. There's a lot of, it's not only like because there's crime, but there's a lot of fear in the United States of the shifting of resources from the people of color, you know, from white community into the people of color. So the conservative views start to kind of like also take a significant role in how this will change. And also a lot of jobs will start to, you know, move away from the country. So this is a time also of where the globalization starts to become very prominent. This is back now at the historic Fairhill grounds. This community is heavily impacted, but then there's like few members who are also my allies. The person on the right, that's Tom. He's a Quaker, and we've been like talking about it, and he's talking about like what can we do in the ground. They Quakers own this property. It's the ground. It's it's a cemetery, but they're also thinking about like how can that space be a catalyst for change. People who were, I forgot her name, but it's one of also the Quakers historical figures who fought against slavery. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of like history around that. Mm-hmm. Then back to the 1971, you know, the Puerto Rican community was very strong also during the time, but then again affected heavily by the shift of economy, politics, and racism, you know, and incarceration. Then human rights, working with Human Rights Coalition, we've been like brainstorming a lot around like the prison abuse and solitary confinement. And finally, this is kind of like the past and present about like how even like in the 1970s, people were trying to fight for education and bilingual education, you know. Remember that big building that was destroyed? It was actually a bilingual education, you know, school.
It was a bookstore.
Right.
High school.
It was
Right.
Julia Burgos.
Yeah.
Julia Burgos, yeah.
And before
a prominent,
before that was the original manual training school.
Right.
Oh.
So it has an interesting kind of like relationship between, I don't know, see sort of like what happens to those dreams, you know? And so we're coming to an end. So this is the question, is like, you know, so Journey to Refuge also is like, it's figuring out, you know, the unfinished dreams in some ways. This is a map of like what we're brainstorming about how we can involve the community around the Fairhill Grounds, which is really close to this area. And here's the last picture of my bicycle. And on a nice, beautiful note, here's the sunset. But not that one. That's not the dream.
Yeah.
Oh.
Dream.
The end.